Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 9 quarterback starter sits for the 2019 fantasy football season. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about news around the National Football League as it pertains to fantasy football, then going into the matchups at the quarterback position, then my top 16 quarterback rankings on the week. Before we begin, let me remind all of you, there are timestamps down in the description, so for those of you looking for specific players, you can go grab those. Also, if you guys haven't already, we are ever so close to getting to that 12,000 subscriber mark, which would be absolutely incredible. So please, if you have not yet already, click that subscribe button, click the bell notification button to stay up to date on my latest content. And if you like today's video, please click the like button. All right, guys. Hey, how is everybody? Hope everyone's doing well. Happy Halloween. I know I'm not dressed up. Never really been someone to do that, so wouldn't probably change this year. But either way, hope everyone has a wonderful day. Go eat some candy. Maybe not too much candy, but because the dentist will then really jam you. But either way, hope everyone's doing well. In terms of news, really quickly, something that I wanted to talk about that I really didn't mention yesterday. The injury news that is kind of surrounding Davante Adams as of right now is that earlier today, he was out there, shoulder pads, helmet, cleats, was doing everything that the other wide receivers were doing early in practice. It's looking like he is trending towards a potential play this week. If in fact he does play, I know many of you in the comment section asked, Andrew, if Davante Adams is full go and is going to play this week, where do you have him ranked? He's Davante Adams. I'm going to have him as like a top 12 guy. We'll kind of dwindle it down to where I specifically like him by Sunday morning. Don't forget, Sunday morning live stream, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Come and join us. Updated rankings, all that kind of jazz, answering questions. So we'll update it then. But top 12 seems like a pretty good spot for him as of right now because of who he is and because of how much the wide receiver position has struggled. Outside of Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones, if they didn't have those two the last couple weeks, the Packers wouldn't be catching these W's, and they are in desperate need of a number one wide receiver like Davante Adams to come back. Other pieces of news. Josh Gordon, wide receiver for the New England Patriots, has been cut earlier today, cut off of IR. So he is a free agent, so he could potentially sign somewhere else. I know some of you may have had him in the IR slot or stashed him on your bench. If in fact he doesn't sign anywhere, that is unfortunate, but hopefully he can find himself a new home in a place where he can find some success and continue his career. I know he's been dealing with some injuries as of late, so hopefully he's healthy, but all in all should be good. Other than that, James Conner and Benny Snell both missed practice today once again. Therefore, Jalen Samuels becomes even more of a valuable play come this weekend and the coming weekends if in fact Conner is to continue to miss with the AC sprain in his shoulder. So as of right now, we are kind of boosting or giving the nod to Jalen Samuels because as it looks, he's probably going to get the entirety of that backfield share, which is even receiving work that he's typically really good at. So as of right now in a PPR, half PPR, his value continues to go up as the week progresses. All right, so those are all the little tidbits of news that I wanted to go over. Let's talk about some matchups at the quarterback position before we get into our rankings. All right, so very interesting things here. The output of points that defenses are giving up to opposing quarterbacks has kind of shifted in the last couple weeks. We've seen, like the Miami Dolphins giving up the most points, or it was the Bengals for a good amount of time. But just recently, the Arizona Cardinals have taken the top spot, giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks on a weekly basis. It's pretty ridiculous. Giving up nearly 2.5 passing touchdowns per game on average. This is a team that gets to play tonight against Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers. I think Garoppolo, again, if you guys are in need of a waiver wire pickup and streamable quarterback, is not a bad option tonight, and I think it's a good way to go. Moving on, the Oakland Raiders giving up a lot of points to opposing quarterbacks get to play against the thumbnail, Matthew Stafford, who has been on fire thus far this season. Also, the Atlanta Falcons, they are on a bye week. Miami Dolphins take on Darnold. We get the Houston Texans playing against Minshew. We get the Detroit Lions playing against Carr. I mean, those are some names that a lot of people don't have starting this week. Carr, Minshew, Garoppolo, Stafford. These are guys that are extremely valuable this week, not only because of the matchup, but because they have been really consistent as of late. They are trending in the right direction, and they're really beginning to, come alive in the second half of the season, and hopefully can continue to be as good as they were in the first half, at least recently. Other than that, Cincinnati Bengals also on a bye week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensively, they've never been good. They try to make some improvements secondary wise. They just can't get it. And it's unfortunate, even with Ryan Tannehill last week throwing 3 touchdowns on that defense. It's going to be tough for them to try to adjust and stop anybody this week. And then we have the Cleveland Browns always struggling, and then the New York Giants. Moving on to the tougher matchups here at the quarterback position, the Baltimore Ravens taking on Brady, the Green Bay Packers, Rivers, the Los Angeles Chargers playing against Aaron Rodgers. Both of those being typically tougher matchups, but I think both quarterbacks should be decent. The Carolina Panthers, the Bears, the Cowboys, the Bills, the Broncos, the 49ers, and the Patriots. Interestingly enough, you see where the 49ers are playing against opposing quarterbacks, not even averaging or giving up 1 passing touchdown per game. Kyler Murray is going to have quite the difficulty moving the ball, especially if, in fact, David Johnson does not play today. He is officially questionable, so he might play, but as of right now, it's going to be tough for that team. It might be all 49ers all night long here on the Halloween special. All right, let's go ahead and talk about my rankings. As we all know, these kind of videos on Thursday are typically shorter because a lot of you don't play in 2 QB leagues. A lot of you play with 1 quarterback, and the top 16 names that I typically kind of go over are available, or you already have one of them, so you're typically going to start that guy. So let's start it off from the top, talking about my number 1 quarterback on the week, Deshaun Watson, the guy that in 6-point per passing touchdowns, in 4-point per passing touchdown formats, is the number 1 overall quarterback, a guy that thus far this season has already scored 21 total touchdowns, more than any other player in fantasy football right now. He's on fire. Yes, Russell Wilson with 20 touchdowns just behind him. He might catch him this week. And I'll tell you why. Deshaun Watson, throughout his entire career, has not played well against the Jacksonville Jaguars. In fact, he has never thrown more than 1 passing touchdown against said team. The Jacksonville Jaguars have always had Deshaun Watson's number, whether it's the pass rush, whether it's the coverage. This defense has always been good against him, and unfortunately, Deshaun Watson's never really been able to prove his value against such a team. But Deshaun Watson, as of late, has been on fire, has been playing well, and obviously he's seen a little bit of struggles earlier on in the season, specifically against the Jaguars, in which he threw 0 touchdowns against that team. This week in London, why do I have Deshaun Watson as my number 1? I really do believe the difference in whether or not Deshaun Watson performs is the usage and implementation of a top wide receiver, whether it would have been Will Fuller or DeAndre Hopkins. It doesn't matter. Now that Jalen Ramsey is no longer with the Jaguars organization, I truly do believe Deshaun Watson in these matchups is going to have an easier time, and I do believe he should be the number 1 quarterback on the week in London. Should be a higher scoring game, in my opinion, considering the lack of depth and skill that this Houston secondary has shown as of late. And Gardner Minshew has been scoring a lot of points. His offense for the Jaguars has been pretty talented and making pretty good strides as of late. I think it will force Deshaun Watson to have to pass heavily, run the ball, and score a lot of points. So he's my number 1 on the week. Moving on to number 2, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers as of late, similar to Deshaun Watson, has been picking up pace and has been on fire. In the last 3 weeks, has scored 10 passing touchdowns. That's incredible. That's exactly what we want to see. Goes to Los Angeles to play against the Chargers, a defense, an offense, a team in general that has not been performing to its highest potential, but that doesn't matter. The 7-1? The 7-1 Packers are coming into town, and they're coming to just rip the soul out of the Chargers' chest. And I think Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to do so. I do believe, because of the information we've heard about Devontae Adams, I do believe he's going to potentially play this week. If that is the case, he's even more of a reliable quarterback play on the week. And I think Aaron Rodgers is my number 2, sits at a pretty good spot. There he is. All right, moving on to number 3, Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott coming off the bye week. Here's the thing about Dak. As of late, we saw a little bit of struggles here and there. Maybe he turns over the ball too much. Not a big deal. We know that Dak Prescott is always good against mediocre or below average defenses. When it gets into some of the more difficult matchups, that's when we find Dak Prescott struggling a little bit, and they'll tend to maybe even run the ball a little bit more in order to just kind of keep the ball out of his hands and get this ball moving, killing clock, having their defense play. And that's perfectly fine. But against teams like the New York Giants, with such an easy matchup, similar to what we saw him do earlier on in this season in week 1, we saw Dak Prescott throw 4 touchdowns and over 400 passing yards against this defense. Now, I don't believe he's going to have that 40-point game like he did in week 1. I don't think that's the case. I think with Ezekiel Elliott back in the lineup, not him coming off of the Costa Rica trip that he took in the preseason, they're going to run the ball. They're going to pass the ball. I expect Dak Prescott to at least have a 3-touchdown game. Nothing more, maybe 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. I think this defense, they've tried to make some improvements by trading for players, but I don't think it's going to make a big enough difference to stop the momentum of the Cowboys this week. Dak Prescott's my number 3. Moving on to number 4, Russell Wilson. Like I mentioned earlier, Russell Wilson is number 2 in terms of touchdowns at the quarterback position, passing and running. A guy that is consistent thus far this season, has thrown a touchdown in every single game, continues to be good. Last week, his performance wasn't dictated on really much a game script. It was more of a, hey, you know what? We already know we're going to beat this team. Let's use a little bit more of Rashad Penny. Let's limit Chris Carson's touches. And then once, in fact, that we're ahead, we can just run out the clock and be done with it. And that was pretty much the entire gist of that game. It could be considered a game script, but as of right now, going against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, like I mentioned earlier with Chris Carson, I think Chris Carson could potentially struggle this week. And I wanted to actually bring up a stat that I had a couple weeks ago in terms of what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have allowed a league. Okay, this was, I don't know how many weeks ago this was. But they've allowed a league, at the time, a league low 315 rushing yards. But I know Derrick Henry had 75 rushing yards. But besides the fact, what have they allowed as of late? Christian McCaffrey on 38 carries, they've only allowed 68 yards. Barkley with 8 carries, 10 yards. Gurley with 5 carries, 16 yards. Kamara, 16 carries, 62 yards. Breida, 15 carries, 37 yards. And Coleman, 6 carries, 23 yards. They don't allow anybody to rush the ball on them. They're pretty good up front. Now, what exactly does that mean? I think Russell Wilson's going to have to put the team on his back. Typically, they don't like to, put all the marbles on or in the corner of Russell Wilson, but I think this is one of those weeks in which you have to. We have to see a 3+ touchdown game from Russell Wilson, and if we don't, then there's a jeopardy of them potentially losing this game. So I think Russell Wilson's going to step up to the task at hand, and he's going to have a good week. He's my number 4. All right, moving on to number 5, Matthew Stafford, the thumbnail. Matthew Stafford is having a great comeback year. Now, when I was handing out awards the other day, I was thinking to myself, could Matthew Stafford be eligible for the comeback award? We saw Leonard Fournette miss significant time last year. We saw Cooper Kupp miss significant time last year. Matthew Stafford played the entire season. So I can't say that he's a comeback player, but he's definitely revitalized his game. The offense for the Detroit Lions as of late has been great. I mean, in the last 2 games, 7 passing touchdowns. Yes, they were against easier matchups, but honestly, the Minnesota matchup was not easy, but Marvin Jones made it easy for them. Oakland this week should be an easier matchup. All signs point towards Matthew Stafford having a good game with the questionable running back that they have, the committee of Carson and Johnson and McKissick and a bunch of garbage that they've kind of aligned themselves with. They're going to be passing the ball heavily, whether it's to Hawkinson, whether it's to Jones, Golladay, and Amendola. I think this is going to be an offense that, as of the coming weeks, is going to be 30 to 40 plus passing attempts every single week from Stafford, and that only means points in fantasy. So as of right now, Matthew Stafford as my number 5 on the week in this matchup. Moving on to number 6, Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson gets to take on Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Well, Bill Belichick in general, but is Lamar Jackson capable of producing enough fantasy points against a defense that has been really good all season long against any opposition? Is there a possibility where Lamar Jackson, despite the matchup, is able to produce? I think they're going to make it very difficult on Lamar Jackson. And despite this, because obviously their pass defense is very good, Lamar Jackson's going to have to throw into tight windows. He's going to have to make plays. And I think this is going to force Lamar Jackson to have to run the ball. If in fact he does, he grants himself a lot of value in 4-point per passing touchdown formats in which rushing yards are that much more valuable. A guy like Lamar Jackson this week, despite, in the last 2 weeks has not thrown a single touchdown, the guy has still managed to find his way on the ground scoring. And that's what I anticipate. I don't expect Lamar Jackson to throw for 2 touchdowns in this game, but I do expect him to use his legs, his most vital piece and his most valuable fantasy piece, to bring owners some value this week. So he's my number 6 on the week. Moving on to number 7, Josh Allen. Okay. You play against the Washington Redskins. They will have Dwayne Haskins as their starting quarterback this week. If, in fact, your defense cannot take the ball back every 3 and out consistently, and Josh Allen, you cannot produce at least 30-plus total points as a team, I'm going to be surprised. I really do think this is going to be a one-sided matchup. I think a team like the Buffalo Bills, yes, they're not extremely talented. Up and down the board, they have talent here and there, but they haven't been fantastic. And I think a guy like Josh Allen is going to get away with easy matchups as such in the coming weeks, to the point where it'll make him look like a better quarterback. In the last 2 weeks, 2 passing touchdowns each game, that's perfectly fine. But the issue is he's throwing nearly a 60-50% passing completion percentage. Just this past week against the Eagles, 16 for 34. That's awful. The week before, 16 for 26. He has not played up to par what we anticipated, but hopefully the easier matchups help him, and I expect him to have a pretty decent game. The rushing ability is always going to give him value, and therefore he sits at number 7. Moving on to number 8. What the heck happened there? Number 8, Tom Brady. All right, so Tom Brady, he's consistent thus far this season. It's kind of ridiculous. I didn't expect Tom Brady to be this good. Even with all the pieces that he lost, he is still managing to be a consistent play in fantasy. Yes, there will be some weeks in which he just doesn't throw many touchdown passes because Sony Michel will steal something, but as of late, typically, thus far this season, 5 games of 2+ touchdowns, 2 games of 3+ touchdowns. There's a possibility that against this defense, it's going to be more of a difficult matchup, but Brady has played enough good defenses and enough good Baltimore defenses in his career, and this is definitely not going to be one of them. I think Brady will be just fine. As my number 8, it's a safe play, and if you have Brady, you should just fire him up because he's going to be good this week. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the last group of quarterbacks really quickly. All right, starting off with number 9, Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins takes on the Kansas City Chiefs this week, and the question will be whether or not this matchup is going to be a higher scoring event, and I think it's going to be. I think, yes, they're going to run the ball heavily with Dalvin Cook, but with getting Adam Thielen back, with having Stephon Diggs really show up for the last month of the season, I do believe Kirk Cousins this coming week is going to have a lot of value. That's why I have him at number 9. Unfortunately, this past Thursday against the Washington Redskins, wasn't able to score any touchdowns. Really, their game wasn't, or at least the game script wasn't dictated on them having to score touchdowns. They killed clock. They played good defense against the rookie quarterback, and they got away with the win. This coming week, I don't think they have the privilege of doing that. They are not going to be able to easily run away with a victory against a team, even with their backup quarterback at hand, with Matt Moore under center. So I do think Kirk Cousins is going to be put to the test, and he should be able to succeed. He's my number 9 on the week. Moving on to number 10, Jameis Winston. Jameis should be higher. I don't think Jameis Winston is this bad of a quarterback in terms of fantasy. I know the guy turns over the ball a bunch. We know this for certain. He's lost so many points in turnovers. It's unbelievable. How many turnovers has he actually had? How many, not fumbles, how many interceptions? He's thrown 12 interceptions this season. You get to take on Seattle. Now, Seattle's going to have an easy time against your defense. Now, will it be vice versa? Can Jameis Winston score on the Seattle defense? I don't think that's going to be an issue. After I saw Matt Schaub throw for 400 plus yards last week, was it 450 plus yards? I think it was just 400. Maybe it's 450. 460? I don't know. All the numbers are just kind of mixing up. As of right now, I think Jameis Winston, yes, he's a guy that turns over the ball, but he somehow manages to score fantasy points every single week to the point where he kind of recovers. He might start off by throwing interceptions or late throwing interceptions, but he'll still have a decent output in terms of fantasy points because just that's what he is. Hopefully, we could see a game in which, yeah, there might be a little bit of weather conditions, but as of right now, I think Jameis Winston is a valuable prospect. He's my number 10 on the week. All right, moving on to number 11, Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett, similar to other quarterbacks, did not have a good week 8. Despite the matchup, it was just didn't go in his direction. The game script, they were down in the game. They could not move the ball at all. This is a guy that has been really good all season long, 15 total touchdowns, and was coming off of a week where he threw for 4 touchdowns against the Houston defense. Now, Denver's gone. You get to play against Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. I don't think this Pittsburgh Steelers defense is good enough to stop an offense like the Indianapolis Colts. This is an AFC wild card kind of matchup, but I do think Jacoby Brissett, this offense, they're far more talented, and they're going to be able to pick apart the defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, that defense dictates a lot of their pressure up front. Watt, Dupree, Hayward, those guys, if they cannot pressure Jacoby Brissett, it is going to be a long day for them, and I think Brissett's going to have himself a pretty good game here. He's my number 11 on the week. Moving on to number 12, Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew is a top 12 quarterback this week. That is correct. With Chark, Conley, Westbrook, Keelan Cole, the offensive line, who's played far better this year than they did last year. They got a couple pieces back from injury, stuff like that. They re-signed some players. That's perfectly fine. They've got a pretty good up front. You got Leonard Fournette playing out of his mind as of late. And then you got a defense in Houston that is going to, get on the road. And, was it last year that the London game where it was the Jacksonville Jaguars team that got arrested, a couple of the guys before the game? I think it was. That was just a mess. Hopefully it doesn't happen this year. But that being said, Gardner Minshew should be fine this week. The offense for the Jacksonville Jaguars in the last couple weeks has been really good. Gardner Minshew has sneakily been a top 12 quarterback in 6-point per passing touchdown formats, and a guy that has been overall a guy that maybe they can't even replace even when Nick Foles returns. He's been that good for the organization, and I think this week he should be fine. I mean, yes, his passing completion percentage is not great, but his receivers make plays and help him out desperately. So I think he'll be just fine at my number 12. Moving on to the 13 through 16 guys that off the waiver wire, if you are in need of a streaming quarterback, are guys that potentially should be picked up and played. And starting off with number 13, Derek Carr. Derek Carr in the last couple of weeks has been really good. I think there was a stat that I read where he has one of the highest, besides I think it's Kirk Cousins, Teddy Bridgewater, I think he has one of the higher passer ratings in the National Football League thus far this season. Maybe I'm mistaken, but listen, from what I've seen Derek Carr do, from what I've seen this offense do as of late, Darren Waller playing like a monster. Tyrell Williams coming back, finds himself some value. Zay Jones added to the offense. Josh Jacobs, this offensive line, they are playing very well. And I think the Detroit matchup this coming week, similar to the Houston matchup last week, is going to be a higher scoring event in which we're getting a 28 to 31 kind of game. Both teams cannot play defense very well, and both teams will be forced to throw the ball early on, especially in the first half, in order to compete with one another. I know Derek Carr likes, or at least the Raiders like to run the ball a lot comparatively to the Lions, so Josh Jacobs will get some value there and probably steal some value from Derek Carr, but all in all, I think he should have a good week. He's my number 13. Moving on to number 14, Ryan Tannehill. Tannehill's been great. 3 touchdowns last week passing. The week before, 2 touchdowns passing. Has been a really good substitution for Mariota, a guy that really was killing that offense as a whole. Now, what do we get to see this week? We get the Tennessee Titans versus the Carolina Panthers, a defense that is not great in the secondary. Sure, they can send a pass rush, but I think Ryan Tannehill will be fine because they're going to trick this defense a lot. Because of how bad this defense has been in terms of giving up explosive plays to the running back position, Derrick Henry is going to start off by dictating this game. Once he does, they're going to use play action to their advantage, and they're going to beat this secondary pretty easily, in my opinion. And then obviously you'll have McCaffrey on the other side of the ball putting up a lot of points. So we'll get a competitive back and forth matchup. I think Tannehill for the 3rd week in a row is a good start. Moving on to number 15, Jimmy Garoppolo. All right, like I mentioned earlier, Jimmy Garoppolo plays against the Cardinals. Cardinals give up the most points to the opposing quarterback position. Thursday night, if you are in need of a quarterback, he's a great play. Unfortunately, Jimmy Garoppolo, they don't need him to win. They need to run the ball and play good defense to win games, and that's what they've done all season long. But hopefully Jimmy Garoppolo with Kittle playing against the easiest defense, and we'll talk about that in the tight end video later. Kittle's going to score a touchdown today. Maybe Emmanuel Sanders, maybe Kittle scores 2 touchdowns today. Either way, I think it's going to be a good matchup for them. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a good play. He's my number 15. Moving on to the last quarterback option, we have Sam Darnold. That is correct. I'm running with Sam Darnold this week. I've been saying it for weeks. We are waiting for this moment. We for those of you who picked up Sam Darnold, you had to suffer through the negative points that he produced against the Patriots, the somewhat terrible week he had against the Jaguars last week, and now we will be subject to watching him play against the Miami Dolphins. And by goodness, I expect him to be good, and I expect him to put up a lot of points because I've been waiting for this moment, because from here on out, I expect good performances from Sam Darnold, similar to what he did last year in the back end of the season. I expect that. I expect this organization to turn it around at least a tad bit. Please, Adam Gase, show us why somebody wants to give you a job, because honestly, if it was my choice, you'd be fired. You, for some reason, don't like good players and you don't know how to use good players. But hopefully, Sam Darnold, this week against Miami, picks up a good W, and I expect him to do so with a lot of passing touchdowns, maybe 2+. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you like this video, please click the like button. I will have the tight end video out later today, so go check that out. Again, happy Halloween. Hope everyone does well. Get some candy in your system. Enjoy the evening. Enjoy the Thursday night football game. And until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.